Hello and welcome to the KPI Institute's webinar, The KPI Selection Process. My name is Andre Costa and I will be your host for today along with our presenter, Alfarazdag Abdallah. This webinar is part of a series of free educational materials that aim to enhance the knowledge and know-how of those interested while also creating a bridge between us as a company and you, our public. The KPI Institute is a research organization specialized in business performance. It operates research programs in 12 practice domains, each linked to a certification course, ranging from strategy and KPIs to employee performance and from customer service to innovation performance. The KPI Institute continuously builds on its values of best know-how, data, and facts, and common sense to achieve its mission of integrating performance as a discipline through research, publications, and, what interests us today, through educational programs such as this webinar. Today, 12 years after the KPI Institute was created, we can proudly say that our products have reached professionals in 5 continents and that our public comprises a worldwide community of 73,000 members online and 28,000 registered companies on smartkpis.com. Today's webinar will aim to find out whether you have what it takes to build a structured process when selecting KPIs for your organizations, and it will be delivered by Alfarazdag Abdallah, who is the business planning manager of the White Nile Company. As a professional, he gained solid background regarding performance management systems due to facilitating the implementation of a performance measurement system and the cascading of KPIs from the organizational level to the departmental and sectional levels for the Asaver Oil and Gas Services, part of the National Upstream Solutions Oil Services Company. This presentation lasts for approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have during the webinar, as they will be answered at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. Enjoy the KPI Institute's webinar, The KPI Selection Process. Now I would like to invite Mr. Abdallah to begin his presentation.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I also want to extend my thanks and gratitude for the KPI Institute for organizing this webinar, and for the participant as well for dedicating their time to attend the webinar. Most organizations they tend to have the performance measurement system, but they don't have the structured process on how they develop this performance measurement system, or what is the process that they have followed in order to select the KPIs with values that help them to achieve their objectives and consequently their strategy. Part of this webinar we will be talking about the preparation for KPI selection, then the facilitation of the KPI selection, and then follow up on the KPI selection, and then reviewing the webinar. The main learning objectives from this webinar are the learner, by the end of this webinar, the learner should know how to design a well-structured KPI selection process, recognizing a useful KPI selection sources, and deploying the selection techniques, and understanding the value flow analysis, and then how to perform the two important techniques in selecting the KPI, which are the clustering and the balancing of the KPIs. Now we'll be talking about the preparation for the KPI selection. And in this particular topic, we'll be tackling 3 main points: the scope clarifications and KPIs expo, and then again we will come to know and to understand the notion of the KPIs clustering. So before starting your KPI selection process, and in this particular stage, you need to state clear what is need to be measured and identify, and state clear what is it that the organization is striving to measure. Is it the strategic objective of the company, like increasing sales, increasing revenue from particular operation, or is it that the process that you need to allocate certain KPIs to understand the performance of this process, like reducing sugar manufacturing cost, for example, in our case in the white mile company. And again, it is very important to have the selection process streamlined in a clear path and identify the scope and expected outcomes. And in order to govern the process and to have a clear objective from that process itself. And having finished the first step from that, we'll go to the other step, which is the process of collection and curation and presentation of relevant KPIs. That's to have a list of relevant KPIs to your particular nature of business, and we call this process the KPI Expo. And in that particular step, you present to the participant list of KPIs to guide their thinking, to inform them, and to inspire their selection process in order to have particular KPIs that add values to the performance measurement system and performance scorecard. And this could be done by preparing the list from various sources, such as smart KPIs, and you can utilize internal resources like operation report, human resource report, or even sales report. Any internal report that has to do with the company business and operation could be of a good value for the selection sources. And this is like general selection sources for any company to have similar or relevant KPIs. It could be from the board of directors, it could be from the management of the company. It could be a benchmarking with a similar company in the same industry with the same nature. It could be industry standards, like in HAC, for example. It could be historical data from the company. It could be from the competitors as well. And one main important source as well, compliance with local authorities or local government. And it could be the workshop itself. It could be a good source for KPI selection. So these are mainly the sources for selecting relevant informed KPIs. Having finished with that, that will lead us to the clustering step, and this is, it's like segmenting the KPIs into different categories. I.e. KPIs has like KPIs have something in common that you can put them into a group in that base. For example, like balance scorecard perspectives, like finance KPIs, or KPIs has to do with certain objective, like increase company sales by 30% in 2017. This is could be base for clustering KPIs, or it could be a process step I mean, you can cluster KPIs based on the input state. And we're doing that because clustering process, it is very essential in itself in order to enable the selection, the alignment, and identify any possible gaps from the very beginning. Here there is a small exercise for you in order for you to practice the clustering technique. The scenario, as you are part of the management team for X company, you have been tasked with proposing a list of KPIs to track the company performance. The task that I want the participant to prepare a list with 10 KPIs and then group similar KPIs into different categories. So basically I want you to cluster the KPIs into small categories. So this the way you could approach your answer, like listing down the KPIs and then grouping them into, for example, financial KPIs, as we mentioned earlier, increase revenues from operations, reduce indirect cost, these two KPIs, mainly financial KPIs, or number of compliance from clients, or percentage of customer satisfaction. And this is another way of clustering KPIs based on the customer perspective. Another perspective that you can use for clustering KPIs is the internal business process perspective, like number of days for recruitment process, closing time, or number of days for payment order processing time. And in these two particular KPIs, we are trying to measure the internal business process for the company. So again, the base for clustering these two KPIs is the internal business process perspective. Another way to cluster the KPIs from an HR perspective point of view, like implementation of competencies assessment program or percentage of implementation of the staff professional certification program. So in this example, you've seen that we've taken the finance, customer, internal business process, and HR perspective as base for clustering our KPIs. The second part of our presentation will be talking about the facilitation, the KPI selection. And in this particular topic, we'll be talking about the selection workshop. Of course, if you want to conduct the selection, that should be done mainly through a workshop. And during that workshop, we'll be asked questions framing, relevant question framing, and present to the participant the value flow analysis and how each step is measured through certain KPIs. And finally, the KPI balancing techniques, and we'll come to know that in a moment. So why are we conducting the workshop? Because as long as you have many participants, then of course you have so many ideas, so many opinions, so you will be having like collective intelligence, and that of course will add value to the KPI selection. And of course, it is a learning opportunity for the participant to come to know new KPIs or new selection sources, because of course the participant will be from different backgrounds, so having different expertise, different knowledge, so definitely this will add value to the selection process. And another main important aspect from why you should conduct the workshop, it's the buy-in. And if you don't get the buy-in for and the support from the participant, then this exercise you will find difficulty to implement the process itself. So the buy-in, it's a key to the success of the KPIs selection and to the performance measurement in general. And who should attend this workshop? It could be your client, it could be, of course, suppliers, and most importantly, the employees, and then the boards, and then the management of the company, because those are the main stakeholders for this exercise, and their input is very essential, and it's needed very much for developing your KPI or the performance measurement system in general. And during that workshop, you will be asking relevant question, and this relevant question has certain framing, because it's a very crucial technique. It helps focusing on the importance of the exercise itself, and it makes sure the relevancy of the selection of the KPIs. I mean that you select KPIs has relevancy to the your industry, to your particular nature of business. And during that, you'll be asking questions like, what are the possible sources for the KPI selection, or is there any standard KPIs for particular objectives? For example, again, we go back to the standard KPIs, or people need to think and gather their mind around in order to come up with relevant KPIs that to the point of the objective itself. Another question you need to ask, I mean, like, how many KPIs deem to be sufficient regarding particular objective? I mean, is it 2 KPIs? Only 1 KPI will be adequate in order to measure and understand the performance of the company in certain aspect. And again, you need to ask questions regarding the data gathering. I mean, is it difficult? Is it easy to access the data? Do you have any sort of system that allows you to gather your data in a easy way? And after you finalize the question part, then you move along to the value flow analysis, and it's a very essential technique as well, and that allows you to understand the value generation from the input, process, output, and the outcome model. And it is very essential for you to understand the objectives, how it could be measured from different perspectives. I mean, you can measure the objective from input point of view, or from an process out of view, or from outcome and output process of view. So this value flow analysis give you like a wider view for measuring the objective from different angles, from different perspectives. And it also gives you the idea what process involved in achieving this particular objective. Of course, assist on selecting the appropriate KPIs that to the point of this objective. So this is as an example for the value flow analysis. As we said earlier, this is the objective. Start with the input, process, output, and outcome. You need to understand what is the process consists of, and then allocate one or two KPIs in order to measure this objective from an input or process or output or outcome point of view. And again, this is an example for value flow analysis for a sugar manufacturer company. The objective is to increase the sale. The input, of course, it could be the budget or any other resources. The process, the KPI that are measuring the process efficiency, it's like cost of sugar metric ton processing, and this is the output, sugar, number of sugar bags, and then the outcome in percentage increase of the sugar sales as a result of the output. So mainly the value flow analysis give you the opportunity to measure the objective from these four perspectives. As a question, what is the difference between the output and outcome? So, if you want to answer this question, we need to go back a little bit to the previous slide. And in the last two columns, there is the output stage and the outcome stage. So the output is merely the result from the process. As we can understand from the slide, the output is the first row is the sugar bags, number of sugar bags. But the impact of the increase in the number of sugar bags, it's the increase of sugar sales. So basically, the outcome is the impact of the output. Having finished with the value flow analysis stage, then we'll be moving to the KPI balancing. And it's basically a quality assurance technique by which you select like minimum 2 KPIs for the same objective, and this is helpful in a manner that lets you avoid focusing on certain KPIs on the expense of another one. I mean, you don't neglect KPIs for the sake of other KPIs. So it's like you balance the measurement process, and of course it gives you a wider perspective on the performance measurement. And you can balance your KPIs in different way, like you can use a leading KPI versus lagging KPI, and you can use a qualitative KPIs and quantitative KPIs, or one efficiency KPI and one KPI for the effectiveness. So it's a way that you balance and you look at your performance from a wider angle. And this is an example for how to balance your KPI. The first KPI, and it has to do with HAC, number of unsafe act recorded. The balancing KPI is lost time injury frequency. The criteria for the balancing, it's the first one, the leading KPI, and it's balanced with the lagging KPI. Another example is the training hours per FTE. The balancing KPI is a percentage of employees with competency at desired level. So the first KPI is the leading KPI, and it's balanced with the lagging KPI again. Another example is drilling costs per meter. It is balanced with number of well drilled. It's again efficiency balanced by effectiveness KPIs. The last example is the percentage of employee satisfaction, and this is balanced with percentage of staff turnover. So employee satisfaction is a qualitative KPI, and staff turnover is a quantitative KPI. So as you can see from the example, normally the KPI are balanced with another different type of KPI, and this is again, as we mentioned earlier, give you the opportunity to understand the performance of the particular objective from a wider perspective. The last step on our process of selecting the KPI, it is follow up on the KPI selection, and in that particular topic we'll be talking about the documentation process and the performance review meeting. So the KPI documentation, it's a communication method for the KPIs themselves, and this could be done through identifying the metadata field and filling that field with the required data and standardizing the documentation form. And is it important? Why? Because it simplifies the communication, as we mentioned earlier, and it's an alignment technique with the KPIs owner and the management and the performance measurement owners, and it's a way of setting the performance measurement rules. In the KPI documentation, we'll be looking into a certain field that normally each KPI document or documentation form should have. It's like identity for the KPI, and in the first field there is a unique identification information regarding the KPI name, KPI number, what is the usage of and definition of this KPI, which balance scorecard perspective. I mean, is it financial KPIs? Is it process KPIs? Is it customer related KPIs or human resource KPIs? So in this particular field, you give a definition for the KPI, sorry, and then the calculation method, what is the standard measured used, calculation formula, and then you give the trend. Is it going, I mean, up, going down? Is it good or bad, and so on. And in the second field, the focus field, you will be identifying what is the purpose of the KPIs, which particular strategic objective corresponding to, and then the data profile, when frequently the data is captured, data capture period, the reporting frequency, and the limitation. And in the second field, or the other field, the target. What is the target for this KPI? What are other related targets? And then you state the threshold. Is it green, yellow, or red? And so on. The measurement administration, the owner, sorry, the current status of the data, and then the data gathering, the lead time, data sources. And so this is in general what KPI documentation form should contain, and it could be customized according to your business, to your need, and the uniqueness of your industry. So after agreeing on a documentation form and collecting the data and understanding the targets and so on, a performance review meeting should be held. And that's why, in order to review and consider some KPIs, maybe they don't of a good value, I mean, they don't serve the purpose of the measurement. So we need to exchange those KPI. Maybe we need to postpone some KPIs for further phases. So in this particular meeting, like assessing the KPIs themselves. And another important thing is that to make sure that the performance measurement purpose itself is met. And this is why you need to hold this meeting and in order to understand those two aspects in general. So to like give a map or mapping the process, the selection process for the KPIs, it's normally, as we mentioned, start with the preparation for the KPI selection, and that indicates 3 sub-processes like the scope clarification and presenting relevant KPIs and grouping the KPIs into similar categories, the KPI cluster. And after that, moving onward to the facilitating KPI and facilitating the KPI selection, and that again indicates for sub-processes like holding the workshop, doing the relevant question framing during the workshop, and the value flow analysis, and KPI balancing. We've talked about these techniques. It's like quality assurance technique to have a wider measurement perspective. And the last step on the process is the follow-up on the KPI selection, and that indicates 2 sub-processes, the KPI documentation and the first review meeting. So to wrap up the and review the webinar, any KPI selection should follow a structured process. That process starts with the clarification of the scope. That's to say what is particularly need to be measured, and preparing the list of relevant KPIs and clustering these KPIs into similar categories based on maybe a scorecard perspective or based on certain objective. And then facilitation the selection via conducting the workshop and performing the relevant question framing and the value flow analysis and the balancing of the KPIs. And the last step is the follow-up phase of the KPI selection process, and that consists of the documentation and the first performance review meeting, and that again to understand whether those KPIs have achieved their purpose, or we need to replace them with other KPIs and so on. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any question or any comment, please don't hesitate to throw them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdallah, for your presentation. And that was the end of it. So if anyone has any questions, now would be the time to ask them. We will wait a minute or two for any questions. Alright, so we received our first question. So, Mr. Abdallah, in your opinion, what is the best way, or how exactly can we identify the objective needs for either a qualitative or a quantitative KPI? When do you best believe we need either qualitative or quantitative KPIs?
The selection between the qualitative and quantitative KPIs, that dictated by the nature of the objective itself. So if you want to measure like employee satisfaction, this KPI is qualitative in its nature. So importantly that the KPI should be qualitative itself, because you cannot count the satisfaction of the employee, but in a way you have to find a way to quantify this satisfaction. So the selection of the whether qualitative or quantitative, that dictated by the nature of the objective itself.
All right. And now a second question. Could you try to explain once more the difference between output and outcome?
Okay, let me go back to the slide. Yeah, so and in the process, in the value flow analysis, it normally consists of inputs, and this input processed, and after that there is output as a result of this process. So if we can see the example of the customer service, the objective is to improve customer satisfaction with the service level. The input for that is the representative of the customer service, number of customer service representative, and customer engagement budget. So these are the inputs. These inputs are processed, and in order to understand the performance, it's time to answer an inquiry or meeting with key customer, number of meetings with key customer. So these are KPIs regarding the process. So as a result for these two steps, the output. So the output is the immediate result of the process. And the outcome is the impact of the output. As a result of the percentage of solved inquiry, there are new clients from referrals. So basically, the outcome is the impact of the output.
All right, thank you very much for your answer. And we have a follow-up question to the first one. Is there any link between strategic KPIs and operational level KPIs? Should they be linked? If they are not, is there a relationship between these two types of KPIs?
Yeah, of course. If we want to answer this question, we need to take it from the strategic level. So we know a strategy starts with the vision of the company, and then that vision like cascading down into strategic objectives. So these objectives should be measured with certain KPIs. So any KPIs associated with the strategic objectives, these are strategic KPIs. And in order to achieve these strategic objectives, you need to move down to the operational level. So you need to have operational KPIs connected with the operation objective and accordingly connected with the strategic objectives and the strategic KPIs measuring the performance of these objectives. So yeah, there is a link, and it should be.
And another question that we received right now, from your experience, what are some of the best practices or the best practice in conducting KPI selection workshops? So if you would have to organize a KPI selection workshop, what would be the best practices examples that you would give for people to remember? Like what should they always try to do?
As we've talked earlier about the selection workshop, first of all, to make sure that you have the relevant KPIs available beforehand, and another important aspect that the participant, because you need to ensure the buy-in from the key stakeholder for this process. So the right selection of the participant is very key for the success of the workshop. And again, most important factor that you should have a clear scope for this workshop. By what are you identifying, what are you really trying to measure, what are these objectives, and what is the particular aspect of measurement that you are trying to tackle during the workshop. So basically the relevant KPIs beforehand, the right selection, and the clear scope of the workshop.
Thank you very much for your answer. And now we've received another question. What are possible KPIs for maintenance activities? If you could give a few examples, maybe.
Okay. Possible KPIs for maintenance. It could be first the lead time for response for maintenance request. This could be a KPI. And if we want to measure the efficiency of the maintenance, like the feedback from the client, this number of compliance, maybe this could be a KPI. Maintenance cost, again, this has to do with the efficiency, the maintenance time itself. So yeah, you can measure maintenance from different perspective. You can measure the outcome of the maintenance itself. If you get another maintenance request from same client or from referral, so these are possible way to put together KPIs for the maintenance.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers and your questions. And we have reached the end of our Q&A session. If you have any other questions, you can ask them away, and Mr. Abdallah will answer by email as soon as possible. That also brings us to the end of our webinar. Mr. Abdallah, do you have any last words for our listeners?
Yes, I want to take this opportunity and ask the participants for their participation and passion for listening to this webinar, and I also would like to extend my thanks to the KPI Institute and the organizer of this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much once again for your presentation.
Thank you.
The KPI Institute appreciates your interest in the webinar, The KPI Selection Process. Follow our websites and our social media channels to find out more details and to subscribe to our next webinars. Also, if you're interested in getting a certification granted by the KPI Institute on vital areas within the performance management discipline, you can explore our scheduled courses on marketplace.kpiinstitute.org. Thank you again for your participation and have a nice day.